Hello everyone, this is Advanced Algebra 1, 5th period. I'm going to wait just a few minutes and see if anyone decides to join. Alright, I see I have 2 people watching. Let's see who you are. Brittany, it's Brittany, and I don't see, okay, it's just Brittany right now. Someone came and they left. Alright, I'll wait just a few more minutes. Then we'll get started. This is a pretty easy lesson. It's going to involve doing 2 IELTS. I'm going to give y'all 2 lessons in one. They're all basically the same thing, solving equations with radicals. And let's go ahead and get started. We probably don't have anybody else to join. All right. Today, our goal is to solve equations that have radicals. And you have to remember how to solve just normal equations. All the rules still apply. Our equations are going to look something like this, where you have the x that you're solving for underneath the square root. And so remember, whenever you're solving for a variable, you want to get it by itself. You don't want to have any operation on that variable to solve it. So you have to do the opposite operation to cancel out everything that leaves you with x by itself. So when you have an equation like this, what you're looking for is the number that makes it true, of course. So you're saying the square root of what number is equal to 10. Well, you may know what that number is now, but I want to show you the process of how to find it if you didn't know. Like, hopefully you know the square root of 100 is 10, so x is going to equal 100. But if you didn't know that, if it wasn't that easy, this is the process you go through. You just want to make sure that on your equation you find your variable, and on that side of the equation where your variable is, you don't want any numbers on the outside. If there are any numbers on the outside of your square root, then you've got to move those numbers over here to the right side, or to the other side that the variable's not on. Once you have just the square root symbol and your whatever's under there, then you have to square both sides, because what makes this square root symbol cancel is if we square it. Remember, whenever we did the multiplication lesson, anytime you were squaring a radical, it just canceled the radical out and you're left with what's under there. So if you square this side, it cancels out that square root and you're left with just the x without the radical, which is what you want. And you know, in an equation, if you square one side, you're going to have to square the other, because whatever operation you did on one side of the equal sign, you've got to do it to the other side. So we have to square this side also. And then you just square it to get your answer. 10 times 10 is 100. So you get x equals 100. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to have, of course, examples that look a little bit different than that, and it's not quite so simple, but they're all pretty easy. So, example 1. Brittany, are you ready to move on? All right, example 1. We are going to solve the square root of n equals 16. So once again, what you should notice with this is that the only thing on this side with our variable is the square root. There's no numbers on the outside. So we're ready to go ahead and square this side. And then we square the right side. When we square this left side, it just cancels the square root symbol out, and you're left with n. And then you just square 16. 16 times 16 is 256. And that is your answer. Okay, I'm pausing just for a second to give you time, if you're writing these down, to write the next problem down. When you have the square root of x minus 4 equals 6, what you should notice, you do have this minus 4. Now this one, we're starting to change a little bit. This one has the minus 4, but it's underneath the square root. So anytime that there's nothing on the outside, you're ready to square that square root. So we're going to square this left side. And when you square this left side, all that squaring does is cancel out the square root, because they're exact opposites of each other. And you're left with your x minus 4. And then on the right side over here, we got to square our 6. And that gives us 36. Now we're not finished here because we don't have x by itself. So we've got to get rid of this minus 4 by adding 4 to the other side. And then you get x equals 36 plus 4, which is 40. If you wanted to check to make sure your answer's right, you just go back into your original problem and do 40 minus 4, which is 36. And the square root of 36 equals 6. You can just plug it in like always to check to see if that's correct. All right. Example 3. We have 3 equals the square root of 2r plus 1. And it's the same thing as the last example. I just, switched up and made sure, if the square root's on the right side, what to do. So we're going to go ahead and square this right side to make the square root cancel out. And when you do, you get 2r plus 1. Whatever's on the inside there is just what you write down. Then you have to square this left side. 3 squared is 9. And then you're ready to solve that two-step equation. This is a two-step equation because you've got to subtract the 1 and then you've got this 2 to divide by. So we're going to subtract 1. And that gives us 8 equals 2r. And then you just have to divide 8 by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So you get 4 equals r. And that is your answer. All right, example 4. Now, on example 4, this is the first one that I've put on here that has a number on the outside of the square root. So make sure you cannot square, don't square that 15 yet, because we've got this number on the outside of our square root that we've got to get rid of. So we want to get rid of this -5 because you want to push everything away from your square root. So we're going to take this -5 and get rid of it over here by adding a 5. And that means we've got to add 5 to the other side of the equation. So -5 plus 5 cancels out. And you're left with the square root of x equals 20. So now you're ready to square both sides. So we're going to square this side. When you square the square root of x, you just get x. And then we're going to square the right side. 20 squared is 20 times 20, which is 400, and that's your answer. Okay, so just make sure that you know you do not square both sides until all numbers that are on that outside of the radical are moved to the other side. All right, I'm going to pause for just a second again, and Brittany, tell me if you're ready to move on. Alright, I'm going to move on to example 5. This is really delayed. Okay, example 5. I'm going to slide this down the shadow there. See if that's a little bit better. Alright, example 5. We're going to solve 16 minus 2 on the square root of x equals negative 20. Now this one's going to involve one new thing. Let me get this lined up again. We have this 16 on the outside of our square root, but we also have this 2 on the outside, this minus 2. So, just like a regular equation, you think of this. Let me write something down right here. You want to think of that just like you would if there were no square root. 16 minus 2x equals negative 20. That's how you think of that equation. That means you've got to get rid of the 16 by subtracting it, but then we're going to have to divide by the negative 2 because that negative 2 is attached to the x by multiplication. So that's the same way that you think of this equation. That minus 2 in front of the square root is attached through multiplication. So we're going to have to divide by that negative 2. First, though, we want to start with the 16. And we want to subtract the 16 on both sides. So those 16s cancel. You bring down your negative with the 2 on the square root of x. I'm going to have to take a few shortcuts because I didn't leave myself enough room, but I think I'll be able to explain what I'm doing without showing every step. Negative 20 minus 16 is negative 36. Okay, so now you have negative 2 on the square root of x equals negative 36. So we're ready to divide by that negative 2. So I'm going to divide. I'm not going to show the line because I don't have enough room here, but I'm going to divide negative 36 by negative 2. And that leaves me with the square root of x equals positive 18. And now you are ready to square both sides because we've gotten rid of the 16, the negative 2, and we're left with just the square root of x. So now we're ready to square both sides. When you square this left side, you just get x. And then when you square the right side, 18 times 18. I don't have my calculator here. I think that's 363. Here, I better do this right quick to make sure. Times 18, 64. That's 144. 8 times 1 is 8. Well, it's going to be 324. And hope that doesn't confuse anybody when they look at it later. That's just my little scratch work. Alright, so x equals 324. Now what we just did all goes together in one of the IX cells that you're going to be doing. I believe it's FF4. And then these last two examples, to me, are just as easy, but they're in FF5, I believe. Yeah, FF4 and FF5. So example 6 and 7 is going to be on the FF5 IXL. Now, these are super easy because if you notice, there's square roots on both sides. That looks harder, but if you think about it, on these, you're just going to have to square both sides, and then all those square roots cancel out, and you're left with just a normal equation. So we have the square root of 2k equals the square root of 6 plus k. And there's no numbers on the outside, and I don't think there are going to be any on the outside of any of these in FF5. They're all going to be just like this. So you're ready to go ahead and square both sides. And when you square both sides, it just makes all the square roots cancel out. And so you're left with 2k on the left side and 6 plus k on the right side. And so now you're ready to solve the equation that has variables on opposite sides. So we want to subtract this k, so it'll cancel out. And that means we want to subtract k over here. And then you're left with 1k. 2k minus 1k is 1k, which is just k. And then you're left with 6. And that is your answer. All right. Moving on to example 7, our last example. Again, you look at your square root on the left side and the square root on the right side. And we're going to square both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and put my little 2 here. You can put the parentheses. I didn't put it on that last one. You don't really have to. But I'll go ahead and put it on this one. We're going to square both sides. And when you do, it just cancels out the square root symbol. So you're left with negative 3n plus 12 equals 3n. Alright, so we want to solve this equation, and now on this one, because I've got this constant 12 over here that I don't want to have to go through 2 steps when I can do it in 1 step, I'm going to get rid of this negative 3n. So I'm going to take this negative 3n off of here by adding the 3n and do the same thing to the right side. So that's going to be plus 3n, so that will cancel. Plus 3n. And that gives me 12 equals 6n. So divide 12 by 6, and you get n equals 2. And that's all there is to this lesson, these 2 lessons. I'll pause for a minute to see if you have any other questions on here. After I go over what this assignment is. You need to do Algebra 1, IXL, FF4, and FF5, and get a SMART score of 80 on both. You have any questions, Brittany? I will tell you that I have updated grades. 5th period's grades, I believe, are updated. Except, I'm not sure if I've put your quiz. Well, y'all haven't had a second quiz. I think I put your first quiz in. I've got to get everybody else's grades updated today. Just so you'll know, the first grade for the 4th 9 weeks is your average from your 3rd 9 weeks. So we're starting off with your 3rd 9 weeks grade, and then we're just adding points to that each day with each assignment. And during, since we're out of school, you know, we're trying to make it easier on y'all. We're not weighting anything. So like the quizzes, any type of quizzes that I give you, they're going to be weighted the same as IXL. It's just all going to go in as total points possible. So, you know, your grades are going to probably be really good this 9 weeks, hopefully. All right. See you later. I'm going to sign off and get ready for my Algebra 2 lesson. Take care.